If you've been following this series on mindset and conflict, you've probably noticed that a lot of what gets in the way of hard conversations isn't the lack of communication skills. It's something quieter than that. It's the stories we've been carrying about conflict, about ourselves, and about whether things can actually change. Today, I want to walk you through a worksheet I created called The Beliefs We Bring. It's designed to help you look at one of those stories with honesty and with gentleness, not to argue it out of existence, but to understand it, where it came from, what it's been doing for you, and what it might need in order to start to shift. This is a free resource, and the link is pinned in the comments. I'd encourage you to have it open alongside this video so you can work through it as we go. Before I walk you through each section, I want to say something about how to approach this worksheet, because it matters. This is not an exercise in self criticism. You're not here to diagnose what's wrong with you or build a case against yourself. The premise of this whole worksheet is that the beliefs you carry into conflict, the ones that make hard conversations harder, developed for a reason. They were trying to protect you from something. They were doing their best. So as you work through this, I'd invite you to bring the same quality of attention to yourself that you might bring to someone you care about who's struggling. Curious, kind, honest without being harsh. That's the spirit this worksheet was written in. The first section starts with a reference list, a list of common beliefs people carry into conflict. Things like, I always say the wrong thing, or if I speak up, it will only make things worse, or people don't really change, so what's the point? This list is here because naming a belief can be genuinely hard, especially if you've never thought about conflict through this lens before. Sometimes seeing your belief reflected in someone else's words is what helps you recognize it in yourself. So, the first thing I'd invite you to do is read through that list slowly. Notice what lands. Notice what makes you feel a little seen, even if you wish it didn't. Then the worksheet asks you to write the belief in your own words. Here's that prompt. Take a moment to read it. That last part matters. Not the polished version, but the actual voice of it. The way it sounds at 2 in the morning before a hard conversation. To give you a sense of what that might look like, here's an example response. Notice how that's specific and a little messy. That's exactly what we're going for. Not a clean summary, the real thing. Take some time with this one before you move on. Once you've named the belief, part two asks you to get curious about its origins. Because most of the beliefs we carry in the conflict weren't formed last week. They developed over time through things we experienced, things we witnessed, or messages we received, often long before we had any tools to process them. The questions in this section aren't asking you to do a deep psychological excavation. They're just asking you to look. Even a general sense of where a belief might have come from is useful. Here's one of the prompts from this section. Take a moment to sit with that. And here's an example of what an honest response to that prompt might look like. You can see how that kind of history would teach someone that conflict is either dangerous or pointless, and how a belief like there's no point in bringing things up makes complete sense given that learning. That's not a character flaw. That's a very reasonable conclusion to draw from what you witnessed. This is the section I want you to spend the most time with, and I want to be direct about why. Most approaches to changing a limiting belief treat it like an enemy, something to be argued with, overridden, defeated. And in my experience, that approach almost never works. Because the belief isn't an enemy, it's a protector. It developed because it was trying to keep you safe from something painful: humiliation, rejection, escalation, loss, and it's been working very hard ever since. So, before we talk about changing anything, this section asks you to offer the belief something it may have never received before: understanding, even gratitude. Here's one of the prompts. This one I encourage you to really sit with before you write. I know that might feel a little unfamiliar, writing to a part of yourself like it's a separate thing, but stay with it. Here's what that might sound like. That shift from fighting the belief to offering it compassion is actually what creates the space for something to change. Not overnight, but it's where it starts. After spending time with what the belief has been protecting, part four asks you to look honestly at what it has cost. And I want to be clear about the spirit of this section. It's not here to make you feel bad, it's here to help you see clearly. Because sometimes we need to understand the full weight of something before we're ready to put it down, not as punishment, as information. Here's one of the prompts from that section. Take a moment with that. It's a big question. Here's what an honest response might sound like. That's a hard thing to sit with, and it's worth sitting with. Not to turn it into self blame, but to let it clarify what you actually want going forward. The final section is where most worksheets like this go wrong. They ask you to replace the negative belief with a positive one, to just decide to think differently. And if you've ever tried that, you know it doesn't really work. So this section doesn't ask you to defeat the belief or override it. It asks what the belief actually needs, because a belief that feels genuinely seen and understood has the space to start softening, not disappearing overnight, just softening. Here's one of the prompts from this section. And here's what that might sound like when someone actually writes it. Notice that it's not, "I'm actually great at conflict." It's not a positive affirmation. It's just a true thing that the belief may not have fully considered. That's all it needs to be. And then the worksheet ends with a sentence completion that I think is worth saying out loud when you get to it. The worksheet has a space for you to fill in the blanks, and it reads, "I'm not blank yet, and I'm learning how to blank." If you've been following this series, you've heard me talk about that word yet before. It's small, and it keeps the door open. And that's the beliefs we bring. 5 sections designed to be worked through slowly, probably 15 to 30 minutes if you give each section the attention it deserves. I want to say one more thing before you go and sit with it. Whatever comes up for you in this worksheet, notice it without judgment. These beliefs have usually been with us for a very long time. They don't need to be gone overnight. They just need to know that you are paying attention. The link to download this worksheet for free is pinned in the comments. And if you want to take the work further, there are 2 other resources linked there as well: a reflection worksheet for after a hard conversation, and a visualization exercise with a guided meditation. They're all designed to work together. Follow if you're not already. This is exactly the kind of thing I talk about here. And I love to hear in the comments, What belief did you name? You don't have to share the whole thing. Even just naming the shape of it can be the beginning of something.